What is going on, good people out there in the old interweb? Welcome back to the channel. As always, hope you're doing well. Like, subscribe, comment below. Hit the Etsy shop. Swing by the Patreon page if you so feel the need to. Let's get a community started of like-minded people that talk about like-minded things. So today I want to talk about not so much a music album, but a music movie. I just recently saw the new Elvis movie that was released June 23rd of 22. Actually, June 24th in the United States. Sorry. It is directed by Baz Luhrmann. However you say that. This is the cat that did Moulin Rouge and a couple of other movies. I'm not very well versed in his movies. I never saw Moulin Rouge. I think all of us heard that song, but it just wasn't something that I sat down and watched. So this is actually my first experience at one of his movies. Now you may be saying to yourself, like, why am I doing a movie review, not an album review? Well, I like to talk all things music, and you cannot talk rock music without talking about Elvis Presley. You just can't do it. I have an odd family connection to Elvis, which is a whole different story for another time. But you just can't talk rock and roll music without talking about Elvis. And I went and saw this movie late one night, and I just wanted to get my thoughts on it if there was anybody out there that was on the fence about seeing it. So let's get into it. Like I said, Baz Luhrmann directed it. It stars Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker, the notorious manager of Elvis Presley. Austin Butler plays Elvis. Olivia DeJonge plays Priscilla. Then there's a whole cast of other people in this. One thing that I will start out with is the movie really should be like, it's from Colonel Parker's point of view. Now, like the movie Ray, it ruined all of us for biographical movies, right? That movie was so good. And this is more in that style. It starts out where Colonel Parker is in the hospital and is kind of reflecting on his life and his time with the king as being his manager. There are some liberties in the movie that they take, but let's just talk about it a little bit. Some key things that I took away from the movie. One was Elvis's rise to fame. One thing that really struck me that I kind of knew just from being a Presley fan was how manipulated the guy was. We've all heard the stories of his lavish life. We have all heard how giving he was, how nice he was. But one thing I didn't really realize, and again, this movie is from Colonel Parker's point of view. And if you don't know anything about Colonel Parker, one, he wasn't a colonel. His real name was not Tom Parker. He was Dutch. He was an illegal alien. I will touch on that in a moment. So it's from his point of view. The thing that struck me about the movie was how great Austin Butler played Elvis. Now, the movie starts Elvis as a little bitty dude, and how he gets his kind of gospel blues influence. One thing I have to say that I was really pleased about the movie in segments when they get to like late 50s Elvis, is the influence that Bill Street had on the guy. One thing that did surprise me in the movie was the inclusion of BB King. Now, if you know Elvis's backstory, and look, I'm not an Elvis expert. I'm not going to sit here and say that I am. Dude was dead. He died, August 16th or whatever of 77. I didn't even come around until 81. I didn't really grow to appreciate Elvis and his musical powers until the last 15 or so years. Um, so get that out of the way. But one thing that really struck me was the inclusion of Bill Street. Of course, he was from Memphis. He was from Tupelo originally. He grew up in Memphis, but them including Bill Street in his relationship with BB King was very striking to me. BB was an influence on Elvis as both a blues musician, but B, a lot of people don't realize the business side of performing that BB influenced Elvis with. And they show you a little bit of this in the movie. Elvis is kind of going through some stuff. It's after the show, the TV show where they made him sing to the hound dog that everybody knows. They include some of that in this. And he goes to Bill Street to basically find his roots. And you get into where he goes into a Bill Street nightclub and BB's just hanging out. And BB refers to him as EP, which is what the Memphis Mafia and most of the people that were close to him referred to him as. BB may have been that close that they were like that, but who knows, whatever. But as Elvis is in this nightclub, Little Richard is on stage burning the place down, and he is struck by Little Richard's performance. There are some other predominant artists in the club. Now, do I feel like they were all there that singular night, or was this a singular night? No, this is more likely a representation of Elvis's time on Bill and the influence of it. Now, we do know, like, they show BB and Elvis buying suits at the famous suit shop, Landry Brothers or whatever that is, that's in the Peabody now. So, yeah, from there, from that moment in the movie, I think the movie gets really good. Kind of before that, it's a little drab where Colonel Parker, the voiceover that Tom Hanks is doing, is talking about how he met him, how he started managing him, how he put him on the Hank Snow tour, how he kind of just took off with him, the TV stuff. They don't really even touch on the Ed Sullivan thing. They show him shaking the hips. They show him, like I said, singing to the hound dog. And from that moment up, when he's on Bill, BB gives him the advice to do your own thing, be your own artist. BB mentions, like Elvis mentions, like, hey, you got this big bus. BB mentions that he pulls up in his Cadillac. Elvis mentions the bus, and BB's like, well, the bus gives me the advantage that if I want to play, I'll play. If not, I'll just get on the bus and leave. But then he makes a statement that, in the segregated South, as it were, at this time period, that he can't play everywhere, that Elvis could make more money than any black artist, which is a poignant thing for my generation and up, and a lot of different generations, and through the 70s, we don't realize that was really going on. And I saw BB King multiple times and actually heard him tell a few stories about segregation, which was interesting. He told a really interesting story once about a water fountain, but anyways, you don't realize, and I'm glad that the director showed how Elvis got his like R&B influence from these cats and took that as most artists did in that era, because the United States was not ready for it, right? Clapton, the Yardbirds, all those guys, the Stones, They had to take that blues music, make it their own, and once they did that, it made those artists famous. And it wasn't until years later that we caught up and realized that, hey, these guys are like in our own backyard. The the British actually turned us on to music that was created here in our own backyard. But anyways, so Elvis and BB have this conversation. The next thing they show is Elvis did a benefit show at a Memphis baseball stadium, and he was kind of told, "Hey, don't shake it. Don't shake one little finger. Don't do anything like that." And this performance is one of the best performances in the movie. It's probably the top two performance in the movie. They just kill. Dude goes out with the black suit, red tie, and if it went down that way, which a lot of people say it did, he just cooks, and that starts Elvis's kind of rebellion against Tom Parker, but not really losing Parker, not really losing his whole grip on Elvis. They show his army years, which was a telling time for the king. His mother passed away. They do show you how close he is to his mother, but when he loses his mother is when the colonel kind of took full control. They show you a large amount of the 68 comeback special, which is a segment that they took a lot of freedom with. They made it out like it was a Christmas special that the colonel had put together. They had this Christmas set built. It's not really how it went down. There's a conversation with Elvis and some guys on the Hollywood sign because Elvis is frustrated with his movie career. That part of it, the movie career thing, he had gotten over that by this point. He was kind of done with the whole movie thing, but it was another way that the colonel was manipulating him to keep him from going out on the road. He would just let him do movies, and millions of people could see him, or whatever, in movie theaters. And it was the record label, RCA, controlling him because he had a certain number of songs and certain songs that he had to record. And the way they manipulated him was publishing. So he only cut certain songs, and the certain songs were created by this certain publishing house. This isn't in the movie, but it's how it went down. So that was one way that the colonel manipulated him, was not letting him go on the road. Now he does a 68 special in the movie. He realizes how much he misses playing live, and so they show where the colonel gets in some gambling debt in Vegas, and he cuts the deal for Elvis to do his residency at the International in Vegas. Now, did that really go down? I don't know. I wasn't around, like I said. Everything that the colonel has ever said publicly about how he treated Elvis, he said it was justified, that Elvis wanted to do it. And I'll touch on something when I said he was an illegal alien. I'll touch on something in just a second. My second favorite part of the movie, they go to the International and they show Elvis putting together the TCB band. Now, he put together, this is fact, one of the badass bands ever known to the world. Ronnie Tutt on drums, James Burton on guitar, the Sweet Inspiration, the Jordanaires, a 30-piece orchestra, a bass guitarist, a rhythm guitarist whose names leave me right now, a pianist, a conductor. I mean, this dude put together one of the baddest bands ever, right? With some high-class musicians. Sadly, we just lost Ronnie Tutt. That was the drummer, hard-working Ronnie Tutt, as he called him. James Burton's still around. But anyways, the first segment of him walking out on stage with the white jumpsuit on at the International. I'm glad that there was no one else in the theater when I saw it because I would almost come out of my seat. If that was what it was like to see that man live, if I had a time machine, that'd be the first freaking place I would go. Because I'm here to tell you, when they put that segment together, that made me move. I mean, I was coming out of my seat. It was so good. The intro, the famous intro, that we've all know, and it was just ridiculous how good that segment was. From that moment, though, is when you get into um, it was a triumph and it was a tragedy. And the reason I say that is Colonel had booked him up for like 6 weeks, and then he tells him, hey, we'll do these 15 dates. You can get on the plane. They show you right before this where Elvis is at Graceland with Priscilla and some guys, and they're picking out fabrics for the Lisa Marie, which is his private jet that you can tour today if you've ever go to Graceland. Where he says, a gentleman in the room says, hey, they want you in China, they want you in Europe, they want you in London. China offered you $1 million, and for some reason the colonel turned it down. Um, Elvis kind of confronts the colonel about this, and the colonel's thing is, yeah, we'll do this, but first we got to do this international thing at Las Vegas. Then I'll book you a 15-date tour, and then we'll talk about going overseas. The way he manipulated him in that situation was he basically worked the dog shit out of him. The 15-date tour was no break. It was land, play, on the plane, land, play, on the plane for 15 gigs. He did the international for 6 weeks before that. And the poignant thing in the movie they show after that segment where they show him playing, is he checks him into a hospital for exhaustion. And that's the first time that we meet Dr. Nick. If you don't know anything about Elvis, Dr. Nicodemus, or however you say it, was his personal doctor that prescribed him the drugs, the uppers, the downers, the sleeping pills, the anxiety, all that. This scene in the movie, they actually used some news footage from Memphis where they had put aluminum foil over the windows where people couldn't get to him or whatever at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. Is the first time that Dr. Nick kind of gives him the cocktail to chill him out. And from that point on, it starts his downfall. Now, we all know that he got fat, whatever, but the thing in the movie that they kept saying, and I don't know, I haven't read Colonel Parker's book, or what this book is based, or what this movie that the book is, the movie is based off a book by Tom Parker, and I have not read it. What he says when Elvis dies, and what he keeps saying, the theme is that the fans killed Elvis because they wanted so much of him. Now, Elvis was a grown dude. He had his own quirks. And I'm not going to get into some of that because it's all speculation and things that I've read. But Colonel Parker used him as merchandise. And that's the one thing that you can take away from this movie, is actually Colonel Parker is the villain in this movie. He materialized Elvis. Now, early on, I think his mother was a buffer between the Colonel and Elvis. And the Colonel put him on everything that you could think of. And they show that in the movie. They're standing in the living room at Graceland. And it's like, shoes, shirts, pillows, teddy bears, buttons, the whole thing. He just materializes the shit out of Elvis. And he works him to death. And they show his degeneration in the movie where it's like I don't know exact numbers, y'all, but it's like 71. He does 100 dates. 72 is like 150. 73, so 160. 74. Blah 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 blah. Up till 1977, where they show the actual footage of Elvis's last show, where he does On Chain Melody. You can get on YouTube and see it. He's way out of shape. He's burned out, but his voice is still there. And then they show some footage of the funeral, and Tom Parker, the voiceover, Tom Hanks voiceover again states what killed him was the fans wanting him. I don't know why they included that in the movie. Maybe it's just because this is from Tom Parker's point of view, but I took away from this movie that everyone around him, and when I say him, I'm talking about Elvis, the Memphis Mafia, his dad, the Colonel. Maybe the only person that did not manipulate him was Priscilla. I think Priscilla really loved him, but Elvis had his demons and lost her. In real life, he had a thing about, he had a phobia of women that had a child, and that kind of hurt his relationship with Priscilla. But they don't touch on that in this movie. But they do show the drugs, the women, the touring, the relentless work schedule deteriorates their relationship, and it's very sad. There's a moment in the movie where Priscilla is begging him to go to rehab. Elvis is talking about how he's in talks to do A Star Is Born with Barbara Streisand, which is a real fact. Christopherson got the role because the Colonel wanted Elvis to have top billing, and Streisand and them argued no, Streisand should have top billing, and that's why Elvis did not get the flick. That's fact. But my overall feeling of the movie, it's almost 2.5 hours. The first 20-30 minutes of it does lag a little bit, but like I said, from the moment of when he does the TV show where he sings to the hound dog forward, is very, very entertaining. It's very enlightening on the life of a rock icon. There are a couple things that did I kind of noticed, like the James Burton Telecaster, the pink Paisley Telecaster was the wrong year. But that's a guitar player thing. And I digress. Should you go see this movie? Absolutely. Is it something that you should like see 2 or 3 times? Like, no, you're not going to want to see this 2 or 3 times. It doesn't depress the shit out of you. It's very gritty, eye-opening on what Elvis went through. Now, again, he was a grown dude. We don't know what he was really thinking. But the thing that I wanted to say about, Colonel Parker and the illegal alien thing was what held Elvis back, and where the industry failed Elvis was the Colonel was an illegal alien and did not let him tour Japan, Europe, Britain, and all that because of the fear of he couldn't get back in the country. Not Elvis, but the Colonel. So the only time that Elvis left the United States, he did go to Canada a little bit and tour, but that was not really nothing big. But the military was the only time the guy left the United States. And once they divulge that and they really show you Colonel Parker's background, it's very eye-opening. So I give the movie 3.5 jams on my 5-jam scale. It did drag in spots. This director's style is not for everyone. Like I said, this is my first movie of his. I think casting was spot on. The accent that Tom Hanks kind of does for the Colonel is a little iffy. Since I've seen the movie, I've kind of binged some YouTube stuff on Elvis. and I watched a couple of things with the Colonel, and he didn't talk that way at all. I don't really know why Tom Hanks chose the dialect and the accent that he did in this movie. But anyway, so there you go. Go see it. Um, Listen to the King. Appreciate what he did for music. If you get a chance to go to Memphis, go to Graceland, pay your respects. Remember, like, subscribe, comment, and music is love, and love is music. Until next time, good people, long live the King.